This is the Millennials in Multifamily Podcast, brought to you by Kronos Investment Partners. We interview industry experts to unlock key information that will help young professionals break into the multifamily world in order to create long-term and short-term wealth. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to iTunes and leave a rating and written review so we can reach more listeners. You can also follow us on our Facebook page at Kronos Investment Partners.
Welcome to another episode of the Millennials and Multifamily Podcast. I'm your host, John Stuber, with my co-host, Fritz Ritter, and today our guest is Sterling Chapman. After graduating with a degree in finance from LSU and an MBA from LSU Shreveport, Sterling spent several years in the financial services industry, focusing primarily on retirement and insurance planning. In early 2018, he began investing in real estate through single-family houses and small multifamily. Over the last 36 months, Sterling has acquired over 42 rental units and has just transitioned into his first apartment syndication. Sterling Chapman, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Millennials and Multifamily Podcast. Before we really dive into your experience in the real estate investing business, could you just tell us and our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you ultimately got into the game?
Yeah, John, Fitz, thanks for having me on. When y'all invited me, I had to think about whether or not I was a millennial, and I obviously am. I was born in 85, but for some reason, in my mind, when I turned 35, I became a boomer. I know it doesn't work that way, but it feels that way.
Can you open up a PDF?
So I started in, I started in my career in finance. I went to LSU. I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I went to LSU for finance, became an insurance salesman and sold investments and did that kind of thing for 4 or 5 years out of school. And I was really young and irresponsible, and it was hard to live off 100% commission, when you're living like that. So I transitioned into the telecom world, and I sold cell phones and landline internet and stuff, and did that for years. And they paid for me to get an MBA. And when I was going through my MBA program, I really got into the leadership and the entrepreneurship. And I was like, man, I really want to go do something and take control. And I also kind of started to notice people in my company were getting laid off left and right. And it really terrified me. I just had this vision of being 40 something with 2 kids in private school and a mortgage and car notes. And then the company just going, all right, well, we're reorganizing, good luck. And I dedicated 20 years of my life to them. So I started reading financial books. I started off with Dave. I must have drove my wife. She was my girlfriend at the time. I must have drove her crazy because I read a Dave Ramsey book and I was like, look, we're never, ever going to have any debt. And we're not going to own any credit cards, and we're going to buy everything cash. And then a week later, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I said, hey, scratch that. Forget everything I said last week. We're going to get as much debt as we can. And she's like, I do not want to be on this roller coaster with you. So I spent about 6 months learning everything I could. So I was doing triathlons at the time. So I was always on the road running and biking. And I was listening to 3 BiggerPockets podcasts a day, and every audiobook I could get my hands on for 6 months. And I must listen to 200 episodes and, listen to 12 to 20 audiobooks. And then I bought my first single family house, and I put $14,000 down, and it cash flowed $500 a month. I say it cash flowed $500 a month. I've since found out it didn't really cash flow $500 a month. In a perfect universe where there's no such thing as maintenance or vacancy, it would have cash flowed $500 a month. But now that I've turned it over to property management and understand the reality of vacancy and maintenance, it cash flows about $100 a month. So I did that again. I bought another house a month later, and then I was broke. I was out of money because saving up down payments for houses is expensive. And I almost I was getting irritated because how am I going to scale like this? It took me 6 months to save that up. So I found some duplexes that were completely run down and beat up, and I got them under contract, and I looped in. I didn't have any investors or credibility at the time, and I didn't know how to fix anything or build anything, but I had a friend who flipped houses, and he had investors. And so he was like, oh, if you want to buy rentals, I'll flip you a rental and you can still get it below market. So I got these duplexes under contract, and I went to him and I was like, look, there's so much margin in this deal. You could use your investors' money to fix it up. And then still I'll give you like 50 grand on top. And then we just like refinance it into my name and take you off the title. And then you make 50 grand, I'll pay all your investors' interest, and I just keep the duplexes at the end of the project. And that's exactly what we did. And I ended up with 80,000 in equity on that deal, and it cash flowed. I always say $2,000 a month, but that was, it will next month, it'll cash flow $2,000 a month. I'd gotten some short-term debt on it. Like it was a 20-year AM with a high interest rate and a 5-year balloon. So it was really only cash flowing like $1,500 a month between the two duplexes. But I'm refining it into a 30-year fixed at the end of this month with a lower interest rate. So now it's going to cash flow $2,000 a month. So that was my kind of my aha moment. I went on to buy 10 other duplexes and 4 other fourplexes and several other single family houses. And I'll close on a 53 unit apartment complex, hopefully before this episode airs.
So definitely want to get into all that, but like we really love creative strategies. Could you just explain a little deeper, like how exactly did like you give your friend 50 grand like on the refi and then take over the title? And like, were you able to pull out all of your capital on that deal too?
Yeah, I didn't have any capital on that deal. So I'll go back and this is like, I always say this was the deal that made me, because prior to that, I had no experience with any of this stuff. And I literally did not sleep for like 4 months, paranoid that it wasn't going to work out.
That's real estate for you.
It's even more complicated than I made it sound. So I'll break it out for you. So I got the deal under contract. It was I got both duplexes under contract for $190,000. I knew they would probably be worth like 400 once they were fixed up, like 200 a piece, and I paid 90 a piece for them. One of them was flooded and gutted, and the other one was just trash from a previous tenant. They were next door to each other, but one of them was higher for some reason and didn't get flooded. So I got them under contract from a wholesaler, and I went to a friend of mine and I said, look, man, I think it's going to cost 60 grand to fix this up, and I'll give you 50. And we got the contract for 190. So 50 plus 60 plus 190 is 300. And so I'll give you 300, let's buy them, get your investors' money, buy them, add me to the title, fix them up. I'll go to a bank and do a cash out refinance. And at the cash out refinance, I'll pull all of, 80% of the appraised equity, because in my mind, it was going to be worth close to $400,000. And I'll pull out 80% of that, and I'll pay you, and I'll pay your investors back, and I'll pay their interest. And then we'll just take you off the title when I refi and pay you back. And so that's that. And it's a little even more complex because he didn't even have enough investors' money to cover the purchase and the rehab. So we're short about 40 grand. So in the middle of that, somehow I borrowed 40 grand from my brother and shoved that in the pile somewhere there, and then ended up paying him like a 30% like debt return. Like it was 30% annual. The whole process took 6 months. So I really only paid him 15%, but it was 30% annualized. And yeah, it appraised for each duplex appraised for 195. So it appraised for a total of 390, and 80% of that is $312,000, which covered the 190 purchase cost, the $60,000 renovation, the $50,000 to my buddy, and the $12,000 in interest.
So basically, you just found a really good deal, and then you had to find a way to fund it. Yeah. And I think that's really important to state. There's all these ways to creatively finance your deals, but it still comes down to like, do you have a good deal, and then just figuring out how to fund it.
I was listening to something the other day. I think it was Joe Fairless was being interviewed by Matt Faircloth, and I love both those guys. And I've been a fan of both of them for a while, so I was listening to it. And Joe said, be wary of anything you get for free. Even these like zero down deals, like they're typically a catch. And I am going through that catch right now with several duplexes and fourplexes that I got like next to nothing down. Some of them I got zero down seller financing. Some of them I got 5% seller financing, and I'm replacing like the sewer lines on all of them. And sewer lines are like several $1,000s. I mean, they're between, like, depending if it's under concrete or if it's like a long run. I mean, it's anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000, and I've got like 6 of them going on right now from those free deals, so there's definitely something to be said for that. So watch out when you're getting something for free. There's such a mania around real estate investing these days, especially like with the internet and with BiggerPockets, and I mean, there's people out there who think buy something just to buy it, but I would encourage people to be a little more due diligent than that and find good deals.
Well, so could you talk to us about that first time, raising capital from your brother? What was that like?
It was, I'm trying to remember. I don't know that it was I don't know it was that difficult. I think it was one of those situations where he just he'd kind of wanted in on it, but didn't want to do the like the dirty work. Mm-hmm. He's I think he works in education, and he knew like I had a degree in finance and an MBA with a concentration in finance, and he knew I'd been like researching it for, at that point, a year, and he had seen me successfully manage my other couple of houses that I bought. So it wasn't a hard sell for him. He I just said, hey, look, I'd be willing to pay you 30% on your money if you let me hold on to it for 6 months. And he was like, hell yeah. Like, I don't know what he was doing it with before, but it wasn't getting him 30%. So it was, it was, hey, do you need any more? Like, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you have any deals like that? I may have some cash I can scrape up.
We've all got, I mean, there's always a deal coming around one way or another, but yeah, I mean, I don't typically pay people 30% for money anymore. But I try and take care of him because he was an early adopter. And he still invests a lot with me. And I always pay him a little bit more because he was like the first one to believe in me. Now everybody wants in on my deals and everybody's trying to give me money. But like back then, nobody like wanted to even hear it or entertain it. So I always give him a few percentage points above everybody else for that early loyalty.
So I had another question, but I'm going to dive in a little bit right there. As you started bringing in other investors who weren't family, what do you think was different? Did you feel as comfortable or less comfortable as you're bringing in outside investors? Because some people get a little wary with getting family involved with investments because you got to see them at the dinner table if it goes wrong. And some people get a little wary with, new investors coming to the deal. So what was the main difference for you?
So I never, as long as we were always in a position of like, it's a really good deal for them. First of all, it's a really good deal. Like I don't do anything where I'm going to be in a position to lose somebody's money, so I don't risk it on flips where the market could turn or anything like that. I typically have like a pretty clear line of sight on an exit strategy to get their money back. So, that first deal I did now, and I'd never done it before, and I was like not sleeping for a long time, like whether the appraisals was going to come in good enough, whether construction, you know what I mean. having done it a bunch of times and seeing everything that can go wrong now, I'm a lot more, confident. I don't feel any really different. I'd prefer to take non-family's money. And the reason I feel that way is with family, I almost feel like even if it wasn't going to be a good deal, they would give it to me if they thought I needed it. And I don't like that. I don't really want to take money from anybody that's not giving it to me because they think it's like the best deal for them. Like I never want to be in a position where I'm asking somebody to invest with me as a favor. I want them to invest with me because that's the highest and best use of their money, and they want to get good returns. And not like, hey, take a chance on me. I really need your help to close this deal type of thing.
That makes sense.
And it's not been like that. When you go into it, you feel like it's going to be like that. You like, that's kind of like some of your insecurities. You feel like, oh man, I don't want to go beg for money. But like what really happens when you start doing a lot of deals successfully is like they come to you and like, hey, come on, let me in your next deal, please. And then like they start bitching about how you never bring them in. Like I've got like 3 or 4 friends that have been like they kind of fuss at me every time they see me because I never call them with my deals, So it's weird how the like kind of a paradigm shift there.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, no, thanks for answering that. My original question was, I was going to ask if you do self-manage all of your duplexes, and if you don't, at what point did you bring on third-party management and why?
Okay, that is a very good question and is near and dear to my heart. So I don't, and I'll never manage another property again.
Sounds like a story.
It is. It's probably not even one I can say on the air, but I'll try and get a PG-13 version of what actually like pushed me over the boiling point. So I managed all of my own properties up until the point I had 30 something maybe. And I also had a baby, and I also had a full-time job managing a large team of telco salespeople, which I still do, by the way. And I also had a podcast that I was, producing every week. And I was overloaded with all of these maintenance, and I'd never fixed anything growing up. Like I didn't just about like every time I'd get a call, I'm like, well, how the hell, what am I going to do about that?
Us finance guys, we're not meant to swing a hammer.
Dude, yeah. My dad is he went to school for construction management, and he went way up in this pipe fabrication company, but he always made fun of it. Like when I would have a problem I didn't know how to solve, and like he'd be like, oh, come on, I can show you how to do that. He's like, it's so simple, a finance major could do it.
Yeah. Just hold the flashlight.
Yeah. So I did it all, and I was going crazy. I was going, I like the leasing part, and I was holding on forever because I couldn't justify giving up the money because every time I bought like a property from somebody, it was in crap condition because the property manager let it go to crap and they didn't do a good job filling it. So I was buying these properties from all these property managers that were driving them into the ground and like weren't filling units, weren't getting market rents, weren't responding to maintenance calls. So the idea of me hiring a property manager and paying somebody to do a worse job than I was going to do just didn't make sense to me. And I looked at like all of the costs associated with it. I'm like, well, that's so much of my profit that I don't want to give away. And it finally, it got to the point I knew I should have done it a long time before I did it. Just philosophically, I knew like I couldn't grow if I was like, running and checking on water leaks 24/7. Like and really like that was when like the syndication part of my business took off, was when I like handed that over because I could like actually focus on it. But what pushed me over the edge was it was right after COVID started, and they had like this eviction ban and you couldn't evict anybody. And this lady moved into the top unit of one of my fourplexes, And she was nice at the signing. She signed the application. She gave me like 3 months rent in advance, which is a warning sign. But I was like, oh, this is perfect. And then like within 24 hours, like I could tell like it had flipped, and she had like a terrible attitude. And anyway, like a day or so after she moved in, there was a water leak in the unit below hers. And the tenant called me. She's like, there's water dripping from my ceiling in the kitchen. And I was like, oh no. So I went, and it was like 7 a.m, and I was very responsive, so whenever they called me, if it was like, especially if it was like water or something that could be a big deal, I would go run there, so the bottom tenant called me at 7 a.m. So I ran over there, and I was like, well, it's obviously coming from the top unit. So I went and like started banging on the door, and she didn't answer. So I assumed she hadn't, I didn't even know if she had moved in yet at this point. So I unlocked the door to go look, and I knocked. As I opened, I was like, maintenance, I need to check. And she came out cussing and screaming, and why did I wake her up? And it turned into this big combative deal. And it just kind of escalated from there. And she was cussing. I mean, this was the ordeal that like went on for like 3 days of us going back and forth, and her never letting me in and wouldn't let me fix. It ended up being a leaky hot water heater in her unit, which I was just trying to fix her stuff, but she was just a terrible, terrible tenant to deal with. And she was screaming and cussing me out, and I was like threatening to evict her, and she's like, beep, 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 you can't because the eviction court's closed. And oh man, I was so emotionally distraught. And finally, like the last straw, after begging and pleading, she let us come in and replace her hot water heater. We came and replaced her hot water heater. And she called me that night at like 9:00 at night and said, I don't have any hot water. And I knew she just had to let it run for a minute, but I was so irritated with this lady. And I was like, all right, well, we'll send a plumber out tomorrow. She's like, you're not going to send him out tonight? You don't have 24-hour service? Well, I'm like, look, I'm honestly not going to go out of my way to help you. And she goes, okay, I'll show you. And she hung up, and not 30 seconds later, the lady below me called me hysterical, screaming that like water was flowing in from the ceiling. She started dumping water down on the tenant below, knowing that like that would get my attention. And I lost it. And I called my buddy who manages, he has him and his brother have 200 properties kind of in a worse area than where my properties are. And they had a system for managing them all. And I was like, look, if y'all don't take these over, I called him I texted him at like 5:30 a.m. I was like, if y'all don't take these over, I'm giving them to somebody else. And he replied back, didn't sleep well? LOL.
Sometimes you just got to put on the ski mask and go handle it, right? No.
Oh man.
Didn't do that.
I don't even know if I should admit this next part, but I'm going to do it anyway. I was so mad, and I was like not even thinking clearly when the lady started pouring the water, and she had been harassing me for days. And I was like, I'm going over there. It was like 9:30 at night. I was in bed, and I got up, and I was like, I'm going over there. And my wife's like, don't go over there. She might have a gun. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I better grab mine. And she goes, no, we're not going over. What's wrong with you?
Oh man.
Unfortunately, I have a story like that too. And you get those crazy thoughts, man. Like I was just like, I'm just going to turn off all of our utilities. And then somebody was like, oh yeah, you can do that. You'll just get a $10,000 fine legally and then spend up to 30 days in jail. I'm like, what? Like, how do they have so much protection? But yeah, man.
Because you live in Maryland.
Yeah.
Well, so Sterling, how did you transition then, from buying like these smaller multifamilies and single families to, the syndication model?
So I started very much going through all of the stuff I just described and knowing that it wasn't like scalable. And there's a lot of other reasons why I don't want my entire wealth to be built in South Baton Rouge. It's, there's demographics that make it not the best place to invest. Our population is declining. We're very, very heavily reliant on the oil industry. And if that goes away, it would be apocalyptic to the real estate community down here, anybody who's trying to fill vacancies. So I want to diversify from there. We've got like high poverty, high crime. I want to diversify out of that. Just physical diversity, because a hurricane could come through and wipe my entire portfolio out tomorrow. So, and just scalability. So I listened to Joe Fairless's book on apartment syndication, and it's like, start a thought leadership platform and do this and do that. So that's when I started my podcast, the Rent Roll Radio Show. And
are you struggling to understand how to underwrite multifamily properties? Hi, I'm John Stober, and I completely understand your problem. I thought underwriting would come naturally to me due to my background in finance and accounting, but I quickly found out that there aren't a lot of resources that cover this subject. I had no idea whether what I was doing was right, wrong, or just original. I don't want you to have to pick up little nuggets here and there like I did. So I wrote an ebook called How to Analyze Big Apartment Buildings and Make Them Feel Small that puts together all the pieces of the puzzle. We're also giving away a deal analyzer with the ebook, and they're both completely free. Don't wait as long as I did to start chasing financial freedom. Go to bit.ly/underwriting ebook and get your free copy today.
And I just kind of I created my company, Crestworth Capital, and it was almost like operating on the back burner. A few months in, I met my partner, Andrew Bruff. He was on Facebook looking for a capital raiser, and I was like, that sounds like something I could do. So I reached out to him. He's a super sharp guy. Worked for commercial banks underwriting loans for the last 20 years. So he kind of spearheads a lot of the acquisitions. And then from there, we kind of stalled out for an extended period because I started that process before I gave up management. And then after I gave up management, we really started doubling down, and we started reaching out to brokers. We started cold calling, apartment owners, and really kind of starting to ramp it up. And we eventually kind of found something through a partnership.
And so what's been different then about the syndication model versus, being local, boots on the ground, and buying these smaller properties?
Yeah. So, with the syndication model, I say syndication model, with the larger properties, you can more kind of efficiently take advantage of the economies of scale when it comes to management and renovations and stuff like that. Buying material in bulk, lining up several renovations in a row with one contractor, get better pricing, on-site management. You get better returns because you're able to kind of utilize the economies of scale a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And just the fact that you're using, you're pooling together a lot of people's money allows you to get into properties that you would never really be able to get into yourself.
So I wanted to kind of talk about your role as the capital partner when you connected with your partner. As you began your capital raising journey, what are some things you learned in that process that you wish you knew when you started out? And what are some tactics maybe you implemented that helped you raise more efficiently?
So I don't, I'm not that good at it. So, there's a lot of things that I've seen other people do that I'd like to do. So at this point, we have a 506B offering. So all of the people that I'm raising money for, it's basically all the people who've kind of been watching my journey for the last 2 or 3 years, and they're just constantly like, hey, I'd like to do that someday. I'd like to get involved. I just don't have the time. I don't want to be hands-on, So it wasn't a stretch for everybody that I asked for money this go around had offered it to me in the past. But I think the key is the whole thought leadership platform, which you guys are doing here, that's a great idea. I've always said, even if nobody listens to my podcast, at least everybody knows that I'm out there like continuously learning, interviewing really, really smart guys every week. And then for me, the beautiful thing is the networking opportunities to get into, because I like having an ongoing relationship with everybody I've ever interviewed. Like, it's not like I just interview them and never talk to them again. Like, we stay in touch. A majority of the guests that I've interviewed, I stay in touch with. I keep up with on Facebook, and we're always picking on each other, and we'll email back and forth and stuff. And I see them at conferences when we have conferences. I can't wait till we get back to having conferences.
You don't like Zoom?
I hate Zoom, and I'm on Zoom like all day, every day for my day job. So like just the extension of it's like I've been staring at a screen for way too long, and it's awkward, and it's like I just like in-person meetings. I feel like I can network better in person. Like, you just kind of like, you walk up to somebody and they just see you standing there and they like start talking to you. Whereas like on a Zoom meeting, I don't even know how you would network on a Zoom meeting. Like I saw the best ever lineup this year, and I really love the people that are going. So I consider going again, but I went to a Rod Cleef one a couple months ago, and the virtual, it was just like watching an infomercial. And Rod's great. I'm not knocking Rod. I'm just saying, being on a Zoom call, it's just I wouldn't want to spend my weekend on a Zoom call.
I completely understand that.
Yeah. No, the in-person events, it's fun. Like when you connect with people on Facebook, or, we haven't been to one since we started our podcast, but it's like once you go to the event, you already know everyone. And then it's not like, hey, like my name's John, like this is what I do. Everyone's like, oh, I already know what you do. Like now let's talk about doing deals together. And then, at night you usually go out and you have fun. It's kind of like a party. Yeah. And so, I'm kind of like, there's so many free Zoom meetups right now. And, I think the way they network is they break up the larger group into like these smaller breakout rooms, which I think that's really cool and really innovative. But I'm just like, I'm not paying like a couple $100 to sit on a Zoom call all weekend.
Yeah, it's not the same. Tony Robbins, when his UPW got canceled, he did a online one, and bless his heart, he's like almost 60, and he's still jumping around in front of his computer and stuff. With probably 5,000 people sitting at home. But I mean, the UPW is like 50 hours in 4 days. So sitting in your chair on your computer 8 hours a day for 4 days straight on your days off doesn't really rock with most people.
But so with that first syndication though, then like what sorts of challenges did you have to, kind of roll through to get that first deal that you have under contract right now?
I mean, we've had all kind of challenges. We've had the seller giving us pushback on due diligence that we want to perform, or we've had, we didn't really have boots on the ground, so I flew out there to walk it. We didn't get initially we didn't get the debt we wanted, so we had to raise more capital than we initially thought. There's all kind of challenges along the way. Was
there anything like, so I know when we started going into multifamily, we were on like this high, we're like, we're going to go buy apartments. And then, you actually get into it and you're just like, man, this is super overwhelming. Like we have no idea what we're doing. The learning curve's really high, and we're competing against like much smarter, sophisticated people now. Did you kind of have a moment like that?
All the time. Yeah. So the beautiful thing about what I'm doing is the partnership. So I'm never the smartest guy in any room. I just kind of like try and work with the smartest guys in all the rooms. So my partners are way smarter than I am. I mean, when it comes to running the numbers, when it comes to, their business acumen around finance and around the debt pieces and they're building models from scratch. One of them has a actuary degree. The other one, like I said, works in banking for 20 years. The other one's already raised 20 million in capital. Like these guys are, so I mean, they all use words I've never heard before. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's how you know you're in the right room.
Yeah. So I love it. I've joked with them. I says, I keep a notepad so I can write down the words I've never heard before, so I can Google them after the call. But I try and add value where I can. So when they asked, when they needed somebody to fly there to walk every unit, and I was like, well, I can do that. When they needed somebody to like summarize a bunch of reports and bills that came in, I'm like, well, I can do that. So just taking every opportunity to add value where you can, to fill in the gap of like where you're obviously out of water, I think is kind of the direction to go there.
So I think that's a really important thing you just hit on, though. You found ways to add value, which is what you got to do when the people in the room are smarter than you. Like initially, though, when you were still forming the partnership and you were talking with these guys, how did you add value, and like what was your role supposed to be so that you could add value to the team?
Yeah, so I got brought in by my partner who was, we kind of came in on more of like a capital raising side plus an experience side. I mean, I've rehabbed a bunch of properties, and I've managed a bunch of properties, and I've managed a bunch of property managers, and I've managed a bunch of contractors. So, whereas we're partnering with these private equity guys who have all this financial acumen and are, wizards on spreadsheets, maybe I'm not like the most sophisticated in those conversations, but, I do have experience. I've built a portfolio myself. I've managed it myself. I've managed contractors myself. I'm physically closer to the location than they are. And I have a podcast because I've been building my brand for a year. And because of that, I'm able to raise capital. So those are, the kind of things that got me in the door. And another place they bring me to add value is bringing me on they finally got to where they put me on the phone with the seller, because they felt the seller was kind of strong arming me, and they thought my direct communication style was effective in pushing back, where they were politer, and I didn't mind going, hey, that's BS, we're not going to do that, all right, so like I said, just that's what got me in the door. And then once I got in the door, it was just kind of look for every opportunity to add value where you can to fill in your gaps.
Right. So, I mean, you had operational experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so did you start your podcast before you teamed up with them? Yeah.
So, my podcast has been running for over a year now. So I started the podcast in November of 2019.
So ultimately, what made you decide to start a podcast? Because there's a million of them out there.
Yeah. So what made me start a podcast was, like I said, reading Joe Fairless's book about establishing a thought leadership platform to build credibility and network and continuously learn.
Mm-hmm. Feel you there. All right. Well, Sterling, I wanted to get to our last section of the show that we call the Fast Five, which are the same 5 questions we ask all of our guests that come on the show. So if you're ready for that, let's get right into it. So question number 1, if you were in your early 20s and you had to start all over again, how would you do that?
If I was in my early 20s and I had all the like real estate exposure and knowledge that I have now, I would 100% house hack a 4-plex with an FHA loan. And then the next year I would do it again. And then the next year I would do it again. And then the next year I would do it again.
That's how we started out. Yeah.
So that sounds familiar. Question number 2, how do you see young professionals adding the most value to experienced operators?
Well, that just depends on what their personal qualities are. So, sometimes it's to raise capital. Sometimes it's to analyze deals, whatever you're good at. I'm a slow typer and not very good at Excel. So I would not, add value as a lead underwriter like Mr. John here has. But I've managed a lot of other properties and a lot of other construction projects. So I just it really it has more to do with your personality and your skill set. So yeah.
Really
I got
yourself.
I gotta ask this follow up. How did you get a finance MBA without like being able to use a spreadsheet?
I mean, I just don't like to. I mean, I can do it. School is mostly like memorizing what's on the test. And I mean, I got it. I graduated with honors. I think it was like cum laude or whatever. I got a 3.5 GPA when I got a master's degree.
Yeah, you never learned how to use Excel.
I mean, I know how to use Excel. I use Excel every day,
Mhm.
just not at like a super high level.
Right. Okay.
I use the hotkeys. These guys that I work with, they don't even use the mouse. I mean, I'm just not.
Yeah, no, the mouse the mouse slows you down.
That's
sure.
John all day.
All right. I had to ask that. So question number 3 though is, what's the biggest mistake you've made in your career, and how have you since adjusted your business?
So I made a lot of mistakes. I've always joked that if I wrote a book, it was going to be like how I made money buying bad deals. But
I'd buy it.
a lot of the mistakes that I made early on were, kind of like we touched on earlier, not doing the proper due diligence, not scoping the sewer lines before I bought it, and having to pay for $25,000 sewer lines in a year and a half period, and not running my numbers. I ran the numbers conservatively on my smaller properties. I thought like I was going to manage them all, and so I ran the numbers with me managing it. And like, if you're going to scale and you're going to grow, like, you're not going to want to manage them. I mean, chances are the reason you got into this business was to like get out of the grind, and managing properties is very much a grind. So it's like hopping out of the frying pan into the fire if you're like trying to get out of your day job to manage properties all day long. So if you really like want to enjoy the fruits of this business in any way, you need to underwrite management into your deals.
That's a good point. Even if you have your own management company,
yeah,
like, you're going to be paying your own management company.
Yeah, for sure.
Very good. What's been your favorite way to incorporate technology or social media into your business?
So I have not like mastered I don't necessarily want my day job to know how much time and energy I spend doing real estate stuff. So there's kind of like a balancing act there where I don't want to like overexpose. I do, I have a Instagram page for my podcast, the Rent Roll Radio Show, and then I have a Facebook page for the Rent Roll Radio Show, and I have a Facebook page for Crestworth Capital. I didn't get quite as much. It doesn't get as much traction, right? People are like more attracted when you're brand building to you and like your face and your, a lot of stuff like that. They don't want to be like spammed with company stuff. And you can like, from brand building perspective, you can like work the company stuff in. But like, I have 2,000 Facebook friends and 200 followers on my company social media things. So that being said, I share my, I have my editor for my podcast put together like little audiograms and post them on my Rent Roll Radio Instagram and my Rent Roll Radio Facebook, but then I'll like share that on my personal one. And I some weeks I don't, and I can tell like I have less views, less downloads than the weeks that I do.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to take advantage of LinkedIn when I really start to ramp up the capital raising. But again, because of my day job, I hadn't quite fully made that transition yet.
I feel you there. Like, I've had people at my company like reach out to me when stuff gets posted on LinkedIn. That happened once, and I was like, "Yep, like I can't go on LinkedIn."
Yeah, I told Whitney Sewell not to tag me in when he interviewed me for his show. I was like, "Oh, don't tag me."
Yeah.
Joe, when I was on Joe Fairless's, he tagged me because I wasn't in direct contact with their people, but I just went in and untagged myself. Yeah.
All right. Well, I feel your pain there. Last question is, what book has been most influential to you along your journey? And it could be like a documentary or a movie or anything like that.
So, I mean, obviously, and I'm sure you hear these two answers all the time, but like, so Rich Dad, Poor Dad was what like completely changed my perspective and got me into real estate investing in the first place. And then like my next aha moment was 2 years later when I read Joe Fairless's Best Ever Apartment Syndication book. And that was what like changed, swung the pendulum again over to the large multifamily syndication.
Well, sweet. Well, Sterling, thanks so much for being a guest on the Millennials and Multifamily Podcast. If anyone wanted to reach out to connect with you or learn more about you, what are the best ways for them to do that?
Yeah, they can go to sterlingchapman.com or crestworthcapital.com or rentrollradio.com, or they can just check out my podcast directly on YouTube or any of the podcast, listening platforms, the Rent Roll Radio Show. They can email me at sterling@crestworthcapital.com, or they can call me at 225-247-5562.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Thanks, Fritz.
Thank you for listening to the Millennials in Multifamily Podcast, brought to you by Kronos Investment Partners. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and a written review at iTunes so that we can connect with more people. You can also connect with us on Facebook at the Kronos Investment Partners page. Finally, head on over to kronosinvestmentpartners.com and sign up for our newsletter so you can stay updated on everything we're doing. If you're interested in partnering with us as we find new opportunities, you can also schedule a phone call with us under the Contact Us tab at kronosinvestmentpartners.com.